Olivia, don't hit her again! Benjamin Gutierrez's voice cracked through the nursery like thunder. Betty Drake didn't flinch. The toddler's small hand was still tangled in her hair, her pretty face flushed with rage, until, for reasons no one could name, she released her grip. Her tiny fingers uncurled slowly, and then she smiled. The room fell silent. Benjamin stood frozen in the doorway, his tailored suit still immaculate from the meeting he'd just left. His jaw was clenched, his dark eyes blazing with fury. Behind him, two of his men hovered uncertainly in the hallway, hands drifting toward concealed weapons, as if a toddler's tantrum required armed backup. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Benjamin's voice was low now, dangerous. Betty looked up at him, still holding Olivia gently. Her voice was steady. "She needed someone to stay, sir. That's all." "I gave you explicit instructions," Benjamin said, stepping closer. "You clean. You don't touch her. You don't speak to her. You certainly don't—" He gestured sharply at the scene before him. "Whatever this is." Betty's heart pounded, but she didn't let go of the child. "Sir, she was hurting herself. I heard—" "I don't care what you heard." His words were clipped, final. "You're a housekeeper, not a nanny, not a therapist. You don't make decisions about my daughter." 20 minutes earlier, Betty had been polishing the marble floors in the East Wing when she heard it. The sound was soft at first, a whimper, then a cry, then something worse. The sharp crack of small fists hitting walls, the crash of thrown objects, the kind of rage that came from a place too deep for words. The other staff had learned to ignore it. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, had pulled Betty aside on her first day. "When the child has her episodes, you stay away. Mr. Gutierrez handles it, or nobody does." But Betty couldn't ignore it. She'd grown up with her niece Keisha, a baby born premature, prone to fits when the world became too loud, too bright, too much. Betty recognized that sound. It wasn't anger, it was terror. She dropped her rag and ran. When she pushed open the nursery door, she found Olivia in the corner, rocking violently, her small hands pulling at her own curls. Red scratches marked her arms where she'd clawed herself. Toys lay shattered across the Persian rug. A stuffed rabbit had been torn in half. No one else was there. Betty crouched low, keeping her distance. She didn't reach out, didn't speak loudly, she just sat. And then, quietly, she began to hum. It was an old hymn from her grandmother's church in Georgia. "His eye is on the sparrow." The melody was simple, warm, steady as a heartbeat. Betty's voice filled the spaces between the child's sobs. Olivia's rocking slowed, her hands stilled. Her wet eyes found Betty's face, confused but curious. "I see you, baby girl," Betty whispered. "You're not alone." The child blinked. Then, hesitantly, she crawled forward. One small hand reached out and touched Betty's cheek, as if testing whether she was real. When Betty didn't pull away, Olivia climbed into her lap, buried her face in Betty's apron, and finally, stopped crying. That was the moment Benjamin walked in. Now, standing in that same nursery, Benjamin's fury filled every corner of the room. "You think you can fix her?" His voice dripped with contempt. "You think a few songs and some Georgia wisdom are going to undo what trained professionals couldn't?" Betty met his gaze. "I don't think she needs fixing, sir." "Get out!" The words were ice. Betty's breath caught. "Please, Mr. Gutierrez, I need this job. I can't—" "You should have thought of that before you disobeyed me." He turned to his men. "Escort her out. Pay her for the week." Betty carefully placed Olivia back in her crib, smoothing the blanket over her small frame. The child's eyes were already heavy, her breathing evening out. For the first time in weeks, she looked peaceful. Betty's voice was barely a whisper as she passed Benjamin. "Walls don't always keep people safe, sir. Sometimes they just make the house colder." Benjamin froze. His fists clenched at his sides. But he didn't turn around. "Get out!" he repeated. The door clicked shut behind her. The nursery fell silent except for the soft sound of Olivia's breathing. Benjamin stood there, alone, his chest tight with something he refused to name. He walked to the crib and looked down at his daughter. She was asleep, one small hand clutching the corner of Betty's forgotten cleaning cloth. The same child who had screamed herself hoarse every night for 3 months was sleeping peacefully. No sedatives, no white noise machines, no nannies with degrees in child psychology. Just a woman who'd hummed an old song and stayed. Benjamin rubbed his face, exhaustion crashing over him. The scratches on the wall caught his eye, dozens of tiny marks where Olivia's fingernails had dragged across the paint, evidence of her grief, her confusion, her rage at a world that had taken her mother and left her with a father who didn't know how to hold her without breaking. He sank into the rocking chair Mrs. Gutierrez had chosen before she died. The wood creaked under his weight. He stared at his daughter, this beautiful, broken little girl. And for the first time in a year, he let himself feel it. The guilt, the failure, the unbearable weight of loving someone he didn't know how to help. Betty's words echoed in his mind. "She's not broken, sir." But what if she was? What if they both were? Downstairs, Betty stood in the kitchen, gripping her worn canvas bag. Mrs. Chen approached with an envelope, her weathered face unreadable. "Mr. Gutierrez says you'll be paid for the full week." Betty shook her head. "I don't want his money." "Then you're a fool." But Mrs. Chen's voice was soft. "That child hasn't slept through the night since her mother's funeral. What you did up there." She paused. "He won't admit it. But you scared him." "Scared him?" "Men like Mr. Gutierrez control everything. Borders, politicians, enemies. But you walked in here and did what all his power couldn't." Mrs. Chen sighed. "You made his daughter smile. That's the most dangerous thing anyone's done in this house." Betty nodded slowly, her throat tight. "She's not broken. She's just scared." "So is he," Mrs. Chen said quietly. The Gutierrez estate was quieter than usual the next morning, as if even the walls held their breath. Dawn light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Guards moved silently through hallways. Maids cleaned in whispers. Everyone knew something had shifted the night before, though no one dared speak of it. Benjamin sat alone in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Betty's face, calm, unafraid, holding his daughter like she was something precious rather than something to fear. He'd pulled her file from his records at 3 a.m. Betty Drake, age 32, from Savannah, Georgia. No formal education beyond high school, no childcare certifications. Just a list of previous employers and a single note from a family in Macon. She was the only one our daughter trusted. Benjamin had built his empire on information, on knowing everyone's secrets, their weaknesses, their breaking points. But this woman, this housekeeper with kind eyes and a gospel hymn, had walked into his fortress and dismantled his defenses without even trying. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Chen entered, carrying a tray. "The child slept through the night, sir. First time in 93 days. Benjamin looked up sharply. You're certain? I checked on her every hour, not a sound. Mrs. Chen set the tray down. She woke at dawn, asking for the singing lady. Something twisted in Benjamin's chest. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the manicured gardens stretched toward the security gates. Somewhere beyond those walls, Betty Drake was probably on a bus back to Georgia, her brief presence in their lives already fading into memory. Except it wasn't fading. Olivia remembered. "Sir," Mrs. Chen said carefully, "Miss Drake left something." She handed him a folded piece of paper. Benjamin opened it to find Betty's handwriting, simple and clear. "Mr. Gutierrez, Olivia's not trying to hurt people. She's trying to find her mother. When children lose someone, they don't have words for it yet. They only have hands. Be patient with her. She's looking for love in the only way she knows how. B.D." Benjamin read the note 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. He didn't know what he was going to do. But for the first time since his wife's death, Benjamin Gutierrez realized that maybe, just maybe, he'd made a mistake. Upstairs, Olivia sat in her crib, clutching Betty's cleaning cloth, humming a tune she'd only heard once but somehow couldn't forget. The Gutierrez mansion had always been a fortress, built on blood money and maintained by fear. It was a place where warmth went to die. Benjamin had designed it that way. After all, sentiment was a liability in his line of work. But now, watching his daughter hum a stranger's song, he couldn't help but wonder if the walls he'd built to keep danger out had trapped something far worse inside. Betty Drake didn't know any of this when she'd taken the housekeeping job 3 weeks earlier. She'd simply needed work, and the pay was better than anything she'd find back home in Georgia. She didn't ask questions about the armed guards or the late-night visitors. She didn't flinch at the coldness that permeated every room. She just cleaned, kept her head down, and tried not to notice the lonely little girl who watched her from the stairs. But some things can't be ignored forever. And in the Gutierrez house, kindness was about to become the most dangerous force of all. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comment section where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. Betty learned the rules of the Gutierrez mansion within her first 3 days. Don't make eye contact with the guards. Don't ask about the locked rooms on the 3rd floor. Don't touch the silver rotary phone in the hallway. It only rang after midnight, and when it did, someone always left the house before dawn. Most importantly, don't get attached. The estate sprawled across 12 acres of Connecticut coastline, a monument to wealth that somehow felt like a mausoleum. Marble floors stretched endlessly, reflecting nobody. Chandeliers hung like frozen tears. Every room was immaculate, cold, and utterly silent, except for the whisper of cloth against wood as the staff moved like ghosts through their duties. Betty counted 17 cameras in the main house alone. Small, discreet, tucked into crown molding and behind picture frames. She noticed them because she'd been taught to notice exits, threats, anything that could turn dangerous. Old habits from a childhood spent in neighborhoods where survival meant awareness. The other staff noticed her noticing. "You're the new housekeeper?" A woman's voice, thick with a Spanish accent, came from behind her. Betty turned to find a woman in her 60s, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes sharp despite the lines around them. She wore the same uniform as Betty, navy dress, white apron, sensible shoes, but carried herself with the authority of someone who'd earned her place. "Yes, ma'am. Betty Drake." Mrs. Alvarez? No handshake. Just an assessing gaze that lingered too long. You're from the South? Georgia. Catholic? Baptist. Mrs. Alvarez's mouth tightened. That explains the hymn. So word had travelled. Betty kept her expression neutral. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Trouble finds you whether you mean it or not in this house. Mrs. Alvarez gestured toward the east wing. Come, I'll show you the supply closet, and I'll tell you what the agency didn't. They walked in silence, past oil paintings of people who never smiled, through hallways wide enough to drive a car. A guard stood at every major intersection, armed, silent, watching. Betty counted 4 on this floor alone. How many men does he keep here? She asked quietly. Enough. Mrs. Fair. Alvarez opened a door to reveal an immaculate closet stocked with cleaning supplies organized with military precision. Mr. Gutierrez has enemies, many enemies. The guards rotate every 6 hours. They report everything: who enters, who leaves, who lingers where they shouldn't. Like near the nursery. Mrs. Alvarez's eyes flickered with something. Approval, maybe, or warning. Especially near the nursery. Every nanny before you quit within a week. 2 of them bled. Betty's stomach tightened. The child hurt them? The child is... Mrs. Alvarez paused, choosing her words carefully. Difficult. She bites, scratches, throws things. Last month she broke a vase over Maria's head. Poor girl needed 12 stitches. Mr. Gutierrez paid her medical bills and gave her 6 months severance to keep quiet. She's just a baby. A baby with her mother's face and her father's rage. Mrs. Alvarez handed Betty a stack of fresh rags. You hummed to her. That was foolish. It worked. That's why it was foolish. The older woman's voice dropped. Men like Mr. Gutierrez don't know what to do with things that work without violence. It confuses them, makes them dangerous. Betty absorbed this. Why are you telling me this? Because I liked Maria, and I liked Sophia before her, and Carmen before that. Mrs. Alvarez's weathered hand gripped Betty's arm. I'm tired of watching women get broken by this house. So hear me. Keep your head down, do your work, and for God's sake, stay away from that child. But Betty had never been good at staying away from children who needed her. That night, she lay in her small room on the 3rd floor, staff quarters, far from the opulence below, and thought about Elijah. Her baby brother. 24 now, but she still saw him as that 10-year-old boy who'd rock himself to sleep when the world became too loud. Elijah, who'd learned to read at 3 but couldn't handle being touched. Elijah, who'd communicated more through drawings than words until he was 12. Elijah, who was serving 15 years in a Georgia state prison for killing the sheriff who'd put his hands on Betty outside a convenience store. She closed her eyes against the memory. The summer heat. The accusation she'd stolen candy when she'd paid for it. The sheriff's breath, hot and sour as he'd shoved her against his patrol car. Elijah running from the house 2 blocks away, seeing his sister in danger, picking up a fallen tire iron and swinging once. Just once. The sheriff died 3 days later. Elijah never spoke again. Betty sent money every month, whatever she could spare after rent, after food, after the lawyer's retainer for the appeal they both knew wouldn't succeed. This job, with its strange silence and cold luxury, paid 3 times what she'd made cleaning offices in Savannah. She could endure anything for Elijah, even a house that didn't breathe. Her phone buzzed. A text from her Aunt May. "They moved him to C Block. He asked about you." Betty typed back, "Tell him I'm okay. Tell him I love him." She set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. At the camera she knew was tucked in the smoke detector. Watching. Always watching. In his study 3 floors below, Benjamin watched the monitors. He told himself it was security protocol. After Anna's death, he'd installed cameras everywhere, determined that nothing would happen in his house without his knowledge again. But tonight, he wasn't watching the perimeter. He was watching Betty Drake's quarters. She lay on her narrow bed, still in her uniform, staring at nothing. No TV, no book, just stillness. He'd expected her to be on the phone with family, complaining about the crazy Mafia boss who'd nearly fired her. But she just lay there, looking like someone who'd learned how to be alone. Benjamin rewound the footage from the nursery, watched again as Betty knelt beside his daughter, humming that hymn. Watched Olivia's small hands release their grip on her own hair. Watched the moment of connection that he, with all his power, had never managed to create. "She's manipulating you," Marco, his head of security, had said earlier. "She probably researched the kid, planned the whole thing." Benjamin wanted to believe that. It would make sense. It would fit the world he understood, where everyone wanted something and kindness was just another weapon. But he'd seen Betty's face when Olivia touched her cheek. He'd seen genuine surprise, then tenderness, then grief, an expression he recognized because he'd worn it himself, while staring at his daughter and not knowing how to reach her. The intercom on his desk crackled. "Sir, the child is refusing dinner again." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Send Mrs. Alvarez." She tried. The child threw the plate at her. Of course she did. Olivia hadn't eaten properly since the funeral. The doctors prescribed supplements, special formulas, anything to keep her weight stable. Nothing worked. She'd take a few bites, then stop, as if eating required energy she didn't have. "Try again," Benjamin said. "Sir?" The guard hesitated. "She's asking for the singing lady." Benjamin's hand stilled on the desk. Through the monitor, he watched Betty sit up in her bed as if she'd heard something. She stood, walked to her door, then paused, listening. Down the hall, Olivia's cries echoed. Not rage this time, but something worse. Loneliness. The sound of a child who'd lost her mother and didn't understand why the only person who'd made her feel safe had disappeared too. Benjamin stared at the monitors, at his daughter's nursery. At Betty's door. He reached for the intercom, his decision already made even as he hated himself for it. "Tell Mrs. Alvarez to ask Miss Drake if she'll try." Marco's voice crackled back, sharp with disapproval. "Sir, you terminated her. I'm aware of what I did." Benjamin's voice was ice. "Now do what I said." He watched Betty's monitor as Mrs. Alvarez knocked on her door, watched Betty's face cycle through confusion, hope, and something like resignation. She nodded, straightened her apron, and followed Mrs. Alvarez down the hallway toward the nursery, toward his daughter, who'd refused comfort from everyone except the one woman Benjamin had tried to send away. He leaned back in his chair, jaw clenched. The cameras captured everything, every angle, every moment, but they couldn't show him what he needed to know. They couldn't tell him why a housekeeper with kind eyes and a gospel hymn had become the only thing standing between his daughter and complete withdrawal from the world. On the monitor, Betty entered the nursery. Olivia's crying stopped almost immediately. Benjamin watched for a long time until his whiskey went warm and the night pressed against his windows. Watched his daughter eat from Betty's hand. Watched her smile. And hated that he needed this stranger More than he'd needed anyone, Betty learned quickly that Olivia responded to rhythm the way flowers respond to sunlight. Instinctively, helplessly. It started the night Benjamin allowed her back into the nursery. Olivia had been screaming for an hour, her face red and tear-streaked, dinner untouched on the tray. Mrs. Alvarez had tried. 2 guards had tried. Even Marco, Benjamin's stone-faced head of security, had attempted to coax the child into eating, only to receive a thrown spoon to his forehead. Then Betty walked in, and the screaming faltered. "Hey, baby girl," Betty said softly, kneeling beside the high chair. "I heard you asking for me." Olivia's bottom lip trembled. Her small hands reached out, grasping at air. Betty gathered her up, and the child collapsed against her chest like she'd been holding herself together through sheer will and had finally found permission to break. Betty swayed gently side to side and began to hum. "Wade in the water, wade in the water, children." The melody was old, older than Betty's grandmother, older than slavery itself. It carried weight, the weight of survival, of secret rivers and hidden paths, of mothers singing their babies to sleep while the world burned around them. Betty's voice was soft but steady, each note wrapping around Olivia like a blanket. "Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water." Olivia's breathing slowed. Her fists unclenched. By the 3rd verse, she was reaching for the spoon, letting Betty guide soft rice to her mouth. By the 5th, she was eating on her own, humming along to a tune she couldn't possibly know but somehow recognized. From the hallway, Benjamin stood frozen, watching through the cracked door. That song. Anna had hummed it. Late at night, when she thought he was asleep, she'd stand at the nursery window with Olivia in her arms and hum that exact melody. He'd asked her once where she'd learned it, and she'd smiled, that sad, distant smile she wore when remembering her grandmother, the only family she'd had before Benjamin. "It's a freedom song," Anna had said. "My grandmother taught me. She said it reminds us that even in deep water, we're not alone." 3 months later, Anna's plane went down over the Rockies. They never found her body, just wreckage and ash and the unbearable silence that followed. Now, this stranger, this woman from Georgia with kind eyes and too many secrets, was singing his dead wife's song to his daughter. Benjamin's hand tightened on the doorframe. He should stop this, should fire her properly this time, remove this disruption before it embedded itself deeper into his household. But he couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only watch as Olivia did something she hadn't done in 13 months. She laughed, a small sound, barely more than a giggle, but it shattered something in Benjamin's chest. Olivia's face, so often twisted in rage or blank with grief, lit up with genuine joy as Betty made silly faces and sang about crossing Jordan's River. He turned and walked away before either of them could see him, before they could see what that sound did to him. Georgia, 15 years earlier. Betty was 17, and Elijah was 10 when she learned that music could be medicine. Her brother sat in the corner of their tiny kitchen, rocking back and forth, hands clamped over his ears. The neighbor's dog had been barking for hours, a sound most people could ignore, but that drove Elijah into agony. He'd already knocked over a chair, already scratched his own arms until they bled. Their mother had died 2 years before. Their father worked double shifts and wouldn't be home until midnight. Betty was alone with her brother's meltdown and no idea how to stop it. So she did the only thing she could think of. She sat on the floor beside him and started singing the songs Mama used to sing. "Wade in the water," "Swing low, sweet chariot," His eye is on the sparrow. Elijah's rocking slowed, his hands lowered. He turned his head toward her, eyes still distant, but no longer panicked. Betty kept singing, kept her voice steady even as her own chest felt tight with fear and exhaustion. By the time their father came home, Elijah was asleep with his head in Betty's lap. She'd been singing for 4 hours straight. "You got the gift," their father had said quietly, standing in the doorway. "Your mama had it too. Some folks just know how to reach through the noise and pull people back." Betty hadn't thought of it as a gift, just survival. Just love doing what love does, showing up, staying present, refusing to abandon someone when the world became too much. Now, holding Benjamin Gutierrez's daughter, she realized nothing had changed. She was still 17 and scared and doing the only thing she knew how to do: stay. By the end of the week, the house had divided into 2 camps. "She's using brujeria," Betty overheard Maria whisper to one of the kitchen staff. "Witchcraft. My cousin saw her with herbs in her room." "Those are tea bags, idiota," Mrs. Alvarez snapped. "She drinks chamomile before bed." "Then explain how she controls the demon child." "That child is not a demon. She's grieving." But the rumors spread anyway. Betty found small religious tokens left outside her door: a cross, a prayer card, a bundle of sage. The guards avoided looking at her directly. One of the younger maids, Sophia, refused to be alone in a room with her. Betty ignored it all. She'd grown up black in the South, had seen enough fear disguised as superstition to recognize it. Let them think what they wanted. She had work to do, and Olivia was thriving. The tantrums didn't disappear entirely, but they shortened, softened. The child began eating regular meals, began sleeping through the night, began showing curiosity about the world beyond her grief. One afternoon, Betty was dusting the library when Olivia toddled in, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She climbed into Betty's lap without asking, settling there like she belonged. Betty kept working one-handed, dusting shelves while humming softly. "Sing," Olivia demanded, her first clear word in weeks. "What do you want to hear, baby?" "Water song." So, Betty sang about wading in the water, about God troubling the water, about freedom and rivers and journeys home. Olivia rested her head against Betty's chest, small fingers playing with the buttons on her uniform. From the doorway, Benjamin watched them. He'd been doing that more often, appearing silently, observing, trying to understand what equation this woman had solved that he couldn't. Olivia looked peaceful, content, loved. When was the last time his daughter had looked loved? "Mr. Gutierrez," Betty said quietly, not turning around. "Did you need something?" He should say yes. Should remind her that this wasn't her child, that she was overstepping, that getting attached was dangerous for everyone involved. But the words died in his throat. "She's singing," he said instead. "She likes music." "My wife." He stopped, started again. "Anna used to sing that song." Betty's hand stilled on Olivia's back. "I didn't know." "How could you?" His voice was rough. "It's not exactly a Mafia anthem. It's a freedom song. My grandmother taught me." Betty finally turned to look at him. "It means even in deep water, you're not alone." Benjamin's expression cracked, just for a moment, just long enough for Betty to see the grief underneath the armor. Then it sealed again, smooth and impenetrable as marble. "She needs a nap," he said curtly. "Yes, sir." Betty stood, lifting Olivia with practiced ease. The child didn't protest, just wrapped her arms around Betty's neck and yawned. As they passed Benjamin in the doorway, Olivia reached out one small hand and touched his face. A brief, curious gesture, as if seeing him for the first time. Benjamin froze. His daughter hadn't voluntarily touched him since before Anna's death. Olivia yawned again and buried her face in Betty's shoulder. They continued down the hallway, leaving Benjamin standing alone in the library, his daughter's fingerprints still warm on his cheek. That night, he found himself at the nursery door again. Inside, Betty sat in the rocking chair with Olivia sleeping in her arms. The lamp was dimmed. Moonlight spilled through the window, painting them both in silver. Betty was humming, not the freedom song this time, but something softer, a lullaby about sparrows and God's watchful eye. She looked up and saw him, didn't speak, didn't move, just held his daughter and met his gaze with those steady, knowing eyes that seemed to see through every defense he'd built. Benjamin's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to say something, to thank her, to warn her, to demand answers about how she'd reached his daughter when he couldn't. But the words tangled in his throat, and all he could do was stand there, watching the woman who'd brought music back into his house of silence. Betty didn't look away, didn't smile, just kept rocking, kept humming, kept being the thing his daughter needed most. And Benjamin realized with cold clarity that he was no longer in control of his own household. This stranger, this woman with hymns and patience and a past she hadn't shared, had become the center around which everything else orbited. His daughter needed her. His staff whispered about her. His carefully maintained order had cracked the moment she started singing. He should fire her, send her away, restore the fortress he'd built. But he couldn't. Because for the first time since Anna's death, his daughter was sleeping peacefully. And if that meant surrendering control to a woman who sang freedom songs and wasn't afraid of monsters, then maybe, just maybe, surrender was the only power he had left. Betty noticed the change on Tuesday morning. She was polishing the banister on the second floor when 3 men in tailored suits emerged from Benjamin's study. Their conversation stopped the moment they saw her. One of them, a lean man with greying temples and eyes like flint, stared at her for 3 long seconds before turning away. "She's always around," he muttered in Spanish as they passed. "Always listening." Betty kept her eyes down, her hand steady on the cloth. She'd learned enough Spanish growing up in Savannah to catch the meaning. Siempre escuchando. Always listening. She wasn't. But it wouldn't matter. The whispers had started small, hushed conversations that died when she entered a room. Guards watching her a little too closely. Mrs. Alvarez warning her to be careful without explaining what she should be careful of. Now the tension had crystallized into something sharper. That night she heard them. Betty's room was directly above Benjamin's study, and sound traveled through the old house's ventilation system like whispered secrets. She'd been trying to sleep when voices drifted up through the floor grate. "Too convenient," a male voice, rough with anger. She shows up, and suddenly the child is calm. It's manipulation. She's gathering intelligence. "For who?" Benjamin's voice, cold and measured. "Name a family that would use a nursery infiltration as strategy." The Calabrese family tried it in Boston. Planted a nanny who fed information for 6 months before they moved. A different voice, higher, nervous. This woman could be the same. Betty Drake has no connection to any organization. "That you know of?" The first voice again. "Boss, I'm telling you, this feels wrong. The timing, her background, the way she's gotten close to your daughter, it's textbook." Silence. Then Benjamin's voice, quieter now. Rico, what did you find? Betty's breath caught. They'd investigated her. Still waiting on the full report, Rico said. But we found something. Her brother's in prison, Georgia State. Did 15 years for killing a sheriff. More silence. Betty pressed her hand against her mouth, heart hammering. What were the circumstances? Benjamin asked. Still pulling details. But boss, a cop killer in the family? That's not nothing. She could be connected to groups we don't know about. Anti-establishment, maybe radical. Or maybe, Benjamin said slowly, her brother killed a cop for a reason. Does it matter? She lied by omission. Didn't mention it in her background check. The agency's form doesn't ask about incarcerated relatives. It asks about criminal history in the immediate family. That qualifies. Rico's voice hardened. I'm telling you, we need to move her out. Tonight, before she gets any closer. Betty closed her eyes. She should have known this was coming. Should have known that in a house built on paranoia and violence, kindness would always look like conspiracy. The voices continued below, but she'd heard enough. She sat on her bed, hands trembling, and thought about Elijah, about the trial, the verdict, the look on his face when they led him away in shackles, about how she'd visited him every month for 8 years until she couldn't afford the gas money anymore, about the letter she'd received last week. They're moving me to solitary. I don't know why. I'm scared, Betty. She'd taken this job to help him, to finally hire a decent lawyer, to file the appeals they'd been told were hopeless. And now these men, these criminals who'd probably killed more people than she could count, were calling her family dangerous. The file landed on Benjamin's desk at dawn. Rico had worked through the night, and it showed. The dossier was comprehensive. Betty Drake's entire life reduced to paper and photographs, birth certificate, school records, employment history. And there, in the middle, the police report from Macon County, Georgia. Benjamin read it twice. Sheriff Gerald Hawkins, 52, died from blunt force trauma to the skull. Assailant, Elijah Drake, 14, arrested at the scene. Motive: Sheriff allegedly assaulted Drake's sister, Betty Drake, 21, during a traffic stop. Witnesses confirm altercation. Self-defense claim rejected. Defendant sentenced to 15 years. Benjamin stared at the photograph of teenage Elijah, thin, terrified, his hands cuffed in front of him. Then at the photo of Betty from the same report, her face swollen, lips split, eyes hollow. He thought of his own sister, Maria, dead at 19 from an overdose. Thought of how he'd hunted down every dealer in her network and made them disappear. Thought of the violence he'd committed in the name of protection, of family, of justice that the law couldn't provide. Then he thought of Betty singing to his daughter, her voice steady and sure, as if she'd never learned to be afraid. Or maybe she'd learned and did it anyway. "What do you want to do?" Rico asked from the doorway. Benjamin closed the file. "Bring her to my study, now." Betty was folding laundry when Marco appeared. No explanation, just a curt gesture toward the stairs. She followed, her spine straight, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Benjamin sat behind his desk, the file open in front of him. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't offer her a seat. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Betty's eyes flicked to the papers. She recognized the police report's layout even from across the room. "You didn't ask?" "Don't play games with me." His voice was ice. "You're working in my home, caring for my daughter." "And you failed to mention that your brother is a convicted murderer." "He's not a murderer!" The words came out sharp. harder than she'd intended. He defended me. From a sheriff. From a rapist in a uniform. Betty's hands clenched at her sides. That man pulled me over for nothing. He put his hands on me. He would have done worse if Elijah hadn't— Her voice cracked. She steadied it. My brother saved my life, and he's been in hell for 8 years because of it. Benjamin leaned back, studying her. So, you took this job to fund his appeals. I took this job because I needed money. The appeals are part of it, yes. But I didn't lie to you, Mr. Gutierrez. I didn't hide anything that mattered. Your brother's conviction doesn't matter? Not to my ability to care for Olivia. Betty stepped closer, her fear burning into anger now. You want to talk about violence? You want to judge my family? Look around this house. Look at the guns, the guards, the blood money that paid for every chandelier. You don't get to stand there and pretend my brother's the monster. The room fell silent. Rico shifted behind her, hand drifting toward his weapon, but Benjamin raised one hand, stopping him. You're right, Benjamin said quietly. Betty blinked. I don't get to judge. He closed the file. But I also can't ignore that you kept this from me. My enemies would use any leverage, any connection. If they found out about Elijah, about what he did, they'd threaten him to get to me. Betty's voice was hollow. I know. That's why I didn't say anything, because the moment you knew, he became a target. He already was. Benjamin stood now, walking to the window. The moment you walked into this house, everyone you love became a target. That's what proximity to me means. Outside, dawn was breaking over the estate. The sky bled pink and gold. So what now? Betty asked. You fire me? Send me back to Georgia? Let Olivia scream herself sick again? As if summoned by her name, a cry echoed from upstairs. Not rage this time, something worse. The sound of a child who'd lost something and couldn't understand why. Benjamin's jaw tightened. She's regressing. She knows something's wrong. Betty turned toward the door. She can feel it. Wait. But Betty was already moving. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard Benjamin's footsteps, Rico's protests, the house waking to the sound of Olivia's distress. The nursery was chaos. Olivia had torn apart her bed, thrown toys across the room. Mrs. Alvarez stood helplessly near the door, one hand pressed to her chest. The child's screams were raw, primal, the sound of every abandonment she'd ever felt condensed into pure anguish. Betty walked in and knelt on the floor. Baby girl, I'm here. Miss Drake, Mr. Gutierrez said— Mrs. Alvarez started. I don't care what he said. Betty opened her arms. Come here, Olivia. The child ran to her, collapsing into her embrace with sobs that shook her entire body. Betty held her close and began to hum. Wade in the water, the freedom song, the survival song. I told you to leave her alone. Benjamin's voice cut through the room. Betty kept singing. Miss Drake? No. Betty looked up at him, Olivia trembling in her arms. You want to fire me? Fine. You want to run my background and dig up every painful thing I've survived? Do it. But right now your daughter needs me, and I'm not walking away from her because you're scared. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. Betty's voice was gentle now, devastating in its truth. You're terrified that she loves me more than she loves you, that I can reach her when you can't, that maybe, just maybe, you're not the most powerful person in her world anymore. Benjamin's hands clenched. Rico stepped forward, but Benjamin waved him back. The room fell silent, except for Olivia's breathing, gradually slowing as Betty rocked her. The child's small hand clutched Betty's uniform, holding on like a drowning person holds driftwood. "Get out," Benjamin said quietly. "All of you." Mrs. Alvarez left. Rico hesitated, then followed. Benjamin stayed in the doorway, watching Betty sing his daughter back from the edge. When Olivia finally fell asleep, Betty laid her in the crib and stood. Her legs were stiff, her back aching. She walked past Benjamin without looking at him. "Betty?" She stopped. "You're right." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "You're dangerous. Your presence here endangers my daughter, my organization, everything I've built. Logic says I should remove you immediately." "But?" Benjamin looked at his sleeping daughter, at the peace on her face that only appeared when Betty was near. "But she's the only one my daughter trusts." He turned to Betty, his expression unreadable. Grief, anger, fear, resignation, all fighting for space. "So against every instinct I have, you stay. For now." Betty nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." Benjamin's voice hardened. "This isn't mercy. It's strategy. The moment you become more of a liability than an asset, you're gone. And Miss Drake?" He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "If you're lying to me, if there's any part of your story that endangers my daughter, I won't just fire you. Do you understand?" Betty held his gaze. "Yes, sir." "Good." He walked past her, then paused at the door. "Your brother, the appeals. How much do you need?" Betty's breath caught. "What?" "How much?" Benjamin repeated. "For a proper lawyer, for the filing fees. How much?" I don't know. 20,000. Maybe more." "Consider it done. On one condition. You tell me everything from now on. No more secrets." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Betty stood alone in the nursery, tears burning her eyes. She didn't know whether she'd just been saved or trapped. Maybe both. Maybe in a house like this, they were the same thing. Through the window, the sun rose higher, burning away the last shadows of night. And somewhere in Georgia, her brother sat in a cell, still waiting for the freedom she'd promised him. Betty wiped her eyes and returned to Olivia's side, humming softly. The song about deep water, about not being alone, even when you absolutely were. The photograph appeared on a gossip blog at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. Betty was making Olivia's breakfast when Mrs. Alvarez rushed into the kitchen, tablet in hand, her face pale. "Miss Drake, you need to see this." The image was grainy but unmistakable. Betty in the garden, Olivia on her hip, the child's small hand touching her face. And there, in the background, Benjamin, standing close. Too close. His expression unguarded in a way he never allowed in public, watching them with something that looked dangerously like longing. The headline read, "The Don and His Nanny, Benjamin Gutierrez's Secret Family." Betty's stomach dropped. "How did they—" she started. "Long-range lens, probably." Mrs. Alvarez grabbed the tablet back. "It's everywhere now. TMZ picked it up. The Post. Every gossip rag from here to Boston." By noon, the whispers had become shouts. Betty heard them as she moved through the house, staff huddled in corners, voices cutting off when she appeared. The guards no longer met her eyes. Even Maria, who'd warmed to her over the past weeks, kept her distance. Sleeping with him, obviously. Using that baby to get close. Saw her coming out of his study at midnight. Betty gripped the banister, knuckles white. She'd been in Benjamin's study at midnight once, yes, but only because Olivia had asked for her father, and Betty had gone to find him. The explanation didn't matter. In the court of whispered judgment, perception was truth. Miss Drake. Rico appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression carved from stone. Mr. Gutierrez wants to see you. Benjamin's office had been transformed into a war room. Phones rang constantly. 3 men in expensive suits argued in rapid Spanish. Papers covered every surface. Screenshots, articles, social media printouts. Out, Benjamin said when Betty entered. The men filed out, leaving her alone with him. He didn't look at her, just stared at the photograph blown up on his monitor. Betty and Olivia in the garden, him watching them like a man starving. "I didn't know anyone was taking pictures," Betty said quietly. "Of course you didn't." Benjamin's voice was flat. "This wasn't you. It's them." "Them? My enemies. Rival families. The press." He gestured at the screens. "They're testing me. Seeing if they can crack my armor by attacking what looks like a weakness." "I'm not." "You are." He finally turned to face her. "The moment that photo went public, you became my weakness. And in my world, weaknesses get exploited. Violently." Betty swallowed. "So what do we do?" "We do nothing." Benjamin stood, pacing to the window. "I release a statement. You're Olivia's nanny, nothing more. The photo is a misunderstanding. You'll move to a different wing of the house, maintain distance from me in public, and—" "No." He stopped. "Excuse me?" "Olivia won't understand why I suddenly can't be near you. She's just starting to bond with both of us." Betty stepped closer. "You want to protect me? Fine. But don't destroy her progress to do it." "Her progress?" Benjamin's laugh was bitter. "Betty, 3 men in my organization have already questioned my judgment. They're saying you've bewitched me, that I'm making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. If I don't contain this, then contain it differently." Her voice was steady. "Tell them the truth. I'm good at my job. Your daughter is thriving. That's all that matters." "In what world is that all that matters?" Benjamin moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't understand what you're asking. Men in my position don't get to make choices based on what's right for one child. Every decision affects hundreds of people, millions of dollars, territorial agreements that took decades to build." "Then maybe," Betty said softly, "you're in the wrong position." The words hung between them like a thrown knife. Benjamin's jaw clenched. For a moment, Betty thought he might explode. Instead, he laughed, a harsh, exhausted sound. "You're either very brave or very foolish. My brother's in prison for protecting me. My mother died when I was 16. I've survived things that would break most people." Betty held his gaze. "I'm both, Mr. Gutierrez. Brave and foolish. And right now, your daughter needs me to be both." Before he could respond, Olivia's voice echoed from the hallway. "Mama!" Betty's heart stopped. The child appeared in the doorway, escaping from Mrs. Alvarez's grip. Running straight to Betty with arms outstretched. "Mama! Up! Baby, no!" Betty started, but Olivia was already climbing her, wrapping small arms around her neck. "Mama!" Olivia repeated, burying her face in Betty's shoulder. The silence in the room was deafening. Mrs. Alvarez stood frozen in the doorway, horror on her face. Benjamin stared at his daughter, something breaking behind his eyes. "Olivia," he said quietly, "Betty's not—" "Mama," Olivia insisted, clutching tighter. Betty's throat burned. She looked at Benjamin, saw the devastation on his face, and carefully knelt down. "Sweet girl, I'm not your mama. I'm Betty, remember? Your friend Betty." "Mama." Olivia's voice cracked, confused and hurt. "Your mama's in heaven, baby. She loves you so much, but she can't be here." Betty stroked the child's hair. "I'm here, though. I'm right here. Is that okay?" Olivia pulled back, tears streaming. She looked between Betty and Benjamin, processing something too complex for her small mind. Then, quietly, "Mama's gone." "Yes, baby." "Not coming back?" Betty's vision blurred. "No, sweetheart, not coming back." Olivia sobbed, and Betty held her, rocking gently. Over the child's head she met Benjamin's gaze. His expression was raw, unguarded, grief and gratitude and something else she couldn't name. "Mrs. Alvarez," he said hoarsely, "leave us." The older woman disappeared. The door clicked shut. Benjamin sat heavily in his chair, watching Betty comfort his daughter through what might have been their first honest conversation about loss. He said nothing, did nothing, just witnessed the moment his child began to understand that her mother was never coming home. After a long time, Olivia quieted. Her breathing evened out. Betty started humming, not the freedom song this time, but something gentler, a lullaby about stars and angels and love that doesn't end. "She called you Mama," Benjamin said finally. "I know. I'm sorry. Don't be." He rubbed his face. "Anna's mother died young too. She used to say that children know how to find love wherever it lives. Olivia's not confused. She knows what she needs." Betty stayed silent, still rocking the child. "The rumors won't stop," Benjamin continued. "They'll get worse. My men will continue questioning my judgment. The other families will see this as weakness." He paused. "Are you prepared for that?" "Are you?" He almost smiled. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." That night, Benjamin transferred Betty to the East Wing, the family wing, where Anna's room still stood empty. He assigned 2 guards to her floor, installed new locks, made calls to every contact he had in the media, threatening lawsuits and worse if the story continued. But the damage was done. By morning, half his lieutenants were demanding a meeting. By afternoon, 3 soldiers had requested transfers, and by evening, someone had spray-painted "Pewter" on the mansion's back gate. Benjamin had the graffiti removed within the hour, but Betty had seen it. She knelt in her new room that night, hands clasped, and prayed for the first time since arriving at the mansion. Not for herself, for Elijah, for Olivia, for the strength to stay in a house where kindness looked like betrayal. "Dear Lord," she whispered, "I don't know if I'm doing right by staying here. This child needs me. But I'm bringing danger to everyone I touch. Show me if I should go. Give me—" "You're praying." Betty's eyes snapped open. Benjamin stood in the doorway, still dressed, exhausted. "The door was open," he said. "I didn't mean to intrude. It's your house." Betty stood, smoothing her dress. "Is it?" He stepped inside, leaving the door ajar. "Because lately it feels like the house belongs to whoever's brave enough to challenge me. And that seems to be you." "I don't challenge you. I just refuse to be afraid of me." "Same thing." He moved to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. "My men think you've bewitched me, that I'm making decisions based on emotion." He paused. They might be right. Betty's breath caught. "I should fire you," Benjamin continued. "Send you away with enough money to start over, to help your brother. It's the smart play, the strategic choice. But I keep seeing my daughter's face when she calls you Mama. I keep hearing her laugh when you sing. I keep—" He turned to face her. "I keep thinking that maybe emotion isn't weakness. Maybe it's the only thing I've gotten right." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. "Mr. Gutierrez." "Benjamin." His voice was rough. "When we're alone, it's Benjamin." "That's not appropriate." "Neither is any of this." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. "You've changed everything, Betty Drake. My daughter, my house, me. I don't know if that's magic or just your particular kind of stubborn grace, but it's real, and it terrifies me." Betty's hands trembled. "I'm just trying to help." "I know." He stepped back, the moment breaking. "That's what terrifies me most." He left without another word, pulling the door shut behind him. Betty stood alone, her heart hammering. Through the walls, she could hear Olivia stirring in the nursery next door. She went to the child, gathered her up when she reached for her, and sat in the rocking chair. Olivia curled against her chest, thumb in her mouth, making small, contented sounds. Through the cracked door, Betty saw Benjamin standing in the hallway, watching them, his expression unguarded, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "You've changed everything," he whispered, too quiet for her to hear, but she saw his lips form the words. "God help us both." Then he was gone, and Betty was left rocking the daughter of a dangerous man, humming songs about freedom and wondering if love in a house like this could ever be anything but a beautiful, terrible trap. Benjamin left for Boston at dawn. 24 hours, he told Rico. "The meeting can't be rescheduled. The Calabrese family won't wait." "Sir, given the recent publicity, double the guards, keep the gates sealed. No one in or out except essential staff." Benjamin had paused at the door, looking back at the mansion. "Watch them, Rico. Both of them." Now, 6 hours later, Betty stood in the nursery with Olivia, watching dark clouds gather over the sound. The weather forecast had called for storms. Something in the air felt heavier than rain. "Dark sky," Olivia said, pressing her face to the window. "Just clouds, baby." "Nothing to worry about." But Betty's instincts, honed from years of sensing danger before it arrived, prickled at the base of her skull. The first sign came at 2:15 p.m. Betty was reading to Olivia when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then died completely, plunging the house into grey afternoon shadows. "Generator should kick in," Mrs. Alvarez called from downstairs. "Give it a moment." But the generator didn't start. And in the sudden silence, Betty heard something else. The distinctive click of the front gate's magnetic lock disengaging. She moved to the window. 3 black SUVs rolled up the drive, unmarked, windows tinted, moving with military precision. "Mrs. Alvarez!" Betty's voice was sharp. "Where are the guards?" Silence. Betty's heart hammered. She scooped Olivia into her arms and ran to the door. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. No guards at their usual posts, no staff moving between rooms. "Hello?" Her voice echoed. "Anyone?" A crash from downstairs. Splintering wood. Men's voices, harsh and efficient. "Find the kid. 2 minutes in and out." Betty's blood turned to ice. She spun, looking wildly around the nursery. The panic room. But she didn't know the code. The closet. Too obvious. Under the bed. Not enough space. The toy chest. Large, cedar-lined, empty except for a few stuffed animals. Betty threw them out, lifted Olivia inside. "Baby, listen to me." She kept her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "You're going to play hide-and-seek, okay? The best hide-and-seek ever. You stay quiet as a mouse. Don't come out until you hear my voice singing. Not anyone else, just me singing. Understand?" Olivia's eyes were huge, frightened. "Mama? I'm right here." Betty kissed her forehead. "Quiet as a mouse, baby girl." She closed the lid gently, her hands shaking. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, male voices getting closer. Betty grabbed the only weapon she could find, a heavy ceramic lamp, and positioned herself between the toy chest and the door. The door slammed open. 3 men. Tactical gear. Guns drawn. The leader was tall, scarred, with cold eyes that swept the room and landed on her. "Where's the kid?" Betty raised the lamp like a club. "Get out of this house." He laughed. "You're gonna stop us with a lamp? Move aside, sweetheart. We're just here for the girl." "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged." He nodded to his men. "Search the room. She's here somewhere." They spread out. One headed for the closet. Another checked under the crib. The leader kept his eyes on Betty, gun pointed at her chest. "Last chance. Tell us where she is, and you walk away." Betty's grip tightened on the lamp. "No!" He moved toward the toy chest. Betty swung. The lamp shattered against his shoulder, ceramic exploding into shards. He stumbled, cursing, and she ran at him. No training, no plan, just desperate fury. Her fists connected with his face, his chest, anywhere she could reach. "You bitch!" He grabbed her hair, yanked her back. Pain exploded across her skull as he slammed her against the wall. Betty tasted blood. Her vision swam. But through it all, she heard Olivia's muffled whimper from inside the chest. "Found her!" One of the men moved toward the toy chest. "No!" Betty launched herself at him, clawing, biting, anything to keep them away. He backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling. The leader grabbed her by the throat, lifting her partially off the ground. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Betty's fingers scrabbled at his grip. Couldn't breathe. Spots danced across her vision. This was it. She was going to die, and they were going to take Olivia, and Benjamin would come home too. Gunfire. Sharp, close, deafening. The man holding her jerked, his grip loosening. Blood bloomed across his chest. He fell, and Betty fell with him, gasping. Rico stood in the doorway, weapon raised, face carved from fury. "Down! Everyone down!" The other 2 men spun, raising their weapons. More gunfire. One fell instantly. The other fired back, the bullet embedding in the doorframe inches from Rico's head. Betty crawled toward the toy chest. Her body screaming in protest, had to reach Olivia, had to... The remaining attacker saw her movement, understood. He turned his gun toward the chest. "No!" Betty threw herself between them. The shot was impossibly loud. Fire tore through her side. She collapsed, her hand still reaching toward the toy chest as darkness rushed in from the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard was Rico's weapon firing again, and then silence. Benjamin's phone rang at 3:47 p.m. He was in the middle of negotiations when Rico's name flashed across the screen. He ignored it. Rico knew better than to interrupt unless... The phone rang again. Immediately. Benjamin's blood went cold. He excused himself, stepping into the hallway. "This better be..." They hit the house. Rico's voice was ragged. 3 men. Inside. The guards. They drugged the perimeter team. Cut the power. Boss, they were after Olivia. The world tilted. Where is she? Safe. Betty hid her. Betty. Rico's voice cracked. She's hurt bad. Took a bullet. Paramedics are here, but... Benjamin was already running. I'm coming. Don't let her die. Rico, don't you dare let her die. He made the 2-hour drive in 70 minutes, his foot pressed to the floor, his mind replaying every decision that had led to this moment. Every enemy he'd made, every throat he'd cut, every choice that had painted a target on everyone he cared about. The mansion was ablaze with lights when he arrived. Police cars, ambulances, his own men securing the perimeter. He took the stairs 3 at a time. The nursery was carnage. Blood on the walls, broken glass, 2 bodies covered with sheets. And there, on the floor, Betty. Paramedics worked over her, hands moving fast, voices clipped with urgency. Her uniform was soaked red, her face was pale, lips nearly blue. An oxygen mask covered her mouth and nose. BP's dropping. Need to move her now. Sir, you can't be in here. Benjamin shoved past them, falling to his knees beside her. Betty! Betty, look at me. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. She tried to speak, but the oxygen mask muffled it. He pulled it aside. What? What is it? Olivia, Betty whispered. Toy chest. Safe. I kept her. Safe. Then her eyes rolled back, and the monitors started screaming. We're losing her! Move! They lifted her onto the gurney. Benjamin stood, his hands covered in her blood, watching them rush her toward the ambulance. Rico appeared at his side. The child? Mrs. Alvarez has her, unharmed. Betty! Rico's voice was unsteady. She put herself between the gunman and the kid, took the bullet meant for Olivia. Benjamin's vision blurred. He looked at his hands, Betty's blood drying in the creases of his palms. This woman, this stranger who'd walked into his house humming gospel songs, had done what his entire security force couldn't, had protected what mattered most, had been willing to die for it. Sir, the police want a statement. Later. Benjamin's voice was dead, hollow. I'm going with her. The investigation? I said later! He turned on Rico, and whatever Rico saw in his face made him step back. Get my daughter to the safe house. Lock down everything. Find out who sent those men and bring them to me alive. But right now, I'm going to the hospital. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Benjamin rode in the ambulance, wedged in the corner while medics worked to keep Betty alive. They cut away her blood-soaked uniform, started IVs, called ahead to the trauma center with coordinates he couldn't follow. Ma'am, can you hear me? Ma'am, stay with us! Betty's hand twitched. Benjamin grabbed it, held it between both of his. Betty, listen to my voice. You don't get to leave. Not like this. Not when... His throat closed. Not when I just figured out how much we need you. Her fingers barely squeezed his. Or maybe he imagined it. They wheeled her into surgery the moment they arrived. A nurse tried to guide Benjamin to the waiting room, but he planted himself outside the OR doors. Sir, it could be hours. I'll wait. And he did, while police came to take his statement, while Rico called with updates on Olivia, safe, asking for Betty, crying. While his attorneys arrived to manage the investigation, while the sun set and the hospital lights hummed and the doors stayed closed. Benjamin stared at his hands, Betty's blood still staining his skin despite washing them twice. He thought about her standing in his nursery that first day, Olivia's hand tangled in her hair, thought about her singing freedom songs, thought about her refusing to be ashamed of her brother, refusing to be afraid of him, refusing to run when any sane person would have. "Sir?" A surgeon appeared, still in scrubs. "Mr. Gutierrez?" Benjamin stood. "Is she—" "She's alive. The bullet missed major organs, but she lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours are critical." "Can I see her?" "Recovery room, 5 minutes. She won't wake up for a while, but—" Benjamin was already moving. Betty lay in a hospital bed, tiny under white sheets, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped steadily. Her face was bruised, swollen, a bandage wrapped around her torso, but she was breathing, alive. Benjamin pulled a chair close and took her hand again. It was warm now, pulse strong under his thumb. "You saved what I couldn't," he whispered. "You stood between death and my daughter like it was nothing, like you weren't terrified, like it was just what love does." The machines beeped. Betty breathed. Outside the room, the hospital continued its endless rhythm. "I don't know how to thank someone for that," Benjamin continued, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to repay a debt that large. But I'll find a way. I promise you, Betty Drake. I'll find a way." He stayed there as night deepened into morning, holding the hand of a woman who'd given everything to protect what he loved most. And somewhere in those hours, Benjamin Gutierrez, a man who'd built an empire on violence and control, learned what it felt like to be utterly, devastatingly powerless. Day 1. Betty didn't wake. The doctors used words like stable and responsive to stimuli. But to Benjamin, she looked like death wearing a hospital gown, pale, still, breathing only because machines reminded her lungs to work. Olivia refused to leave her side. "Baby, you need to eat something," Mrs. Alvarez tried, holding out a sandwich. "Please, for me?" Olivia shook her head, her small hand clutching Betty's limp fingers. She'd been sitting in that chair for 6 hours, humming, broken, off-key attempts at the freedom song Betty had taught her. "Wade in the water, wade in the water." The child couldn't remember all the words, but she hummed the melody over and over, as if her voice alone could call Betty back from wherever she'd gone. Benjamin watched from the doorway, his chest tight. His daughter, who'd spent months inflicting pain on everyone who came near, now sat vigil like a tiny sentinel, guarding the woman who'd saved her life. "She won't eat," Mrs. Alvarez said quietly, appearing beside him. "Won't sleep, won't speak except to hum that song. How long can she go on like this?" "Not much longer." The older woman's face was drawn with worry. "Children her age can't afford to miss meals. And the trauma—" She shook her head. "She saw blood, heard gunshots. She knows something terrible happened." Benjamin's jaw clenched. "Get a feeding specialist, a child psychologist, whatever she needs." "Sir, what she needs is lying in that bed." He knew. God help him, he knew. Day 2, Olivia stopped humming. She simply sat, staring at Betty's face, tears running silently down her cheeks. No sobs, no sound, just grief too large for her small body to contain. The doctors tried everything, offered toys, treats, television. Nurses spoke to her in soft voices, tried to coax her into the playroom. She ignored them all, her attention fixed on Betty with the intensity of someone holding a lifeline. "This isn't healthy," the pediatrician told Benjamin. "She's in shock. We should consider sedation, give her body a chance to—" "No!" Benjamin's voice was ice. No drugs. She stays with Betty. Mr. Gutierrez, I understand your concern, but you don't understand anything. He turned on the doctor, and the man stepped back. That woman took a bullet for my daughter. If Olivia needs to sit here and cry until Betty wakes up, then that's what happens. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Benjamin returned to the room. Olivia had climbed into the hospital bed somehow, curled against Betty's side like she used to curl against Anna. Her small hand rested on Betty's chest, rising and falling with each breath. He pulled a chair close and sat. For the first time since Anna's death, he prayed, not to the God of his childhood, but to whatever force might be listening. Please. I've done terrible things. I've earned whatever punishment you want to give me, but not her, not Betty, and not my daughter. Let Betty wake up. Let Olivia come back to herself. I'll do anything, anything. The machines beeped. Betty breathed. Olivia cried silent tears, and nothing changed. Day 3. Mrs. Alvarez found Benjamin in the hospital chapel. He wasn't Catholic anymore, hadn't been since Anna died. But the chapel was quiet, empty, and he needed somewhere to sit that wasn't Betty's room, where his daughter's grief was slowly destroying her. I brought you coffee, Mrs. Alvarez said, setting a cup beside him. You haven't eaten since yesterday. I'm not hungry. Neither is Olivia. You're both starving yourselves. She sat in the pew behind him. This won't bring her back faster. I know. His voice was hollow. But it's all I can do. Wait and hope, and he laughed bitterly. I built an empire on action, on taking what I wanted, destroying what threatened me. And now the two people who matter most are slipping away, and I can't stop it. Mrs. Alvarez was quiet for a long moment. Then, maybe God sent her here not to save Olivia, but to save you. Benjamin turned to look at her. What? Miss Drake. The older woman's eyes were gentle. You think she came to this house by accident? A woman with her gift for healing, walking into a place full of broken people? She shook her head. Your daughter needed her, yes. But, sir, so did you. I don't need. You haven't smiled in 2 years. You barely touch your daughter. You treat your home like a fortress and your people like soldiers. Mrs. Alvarez leaned forward. But when Miss Drake sings, when she holds Olivia, when she looks at you like you're human instead of dangerous, you become someone different, someone who remembers what it is to feel. Benjamin's throat tightened. She made me weak. She made you human. Mrs. Alvarez stood, crossing herself. There's a difference. She left him alone with his coffee and his guilt and the statues of saints who'd probably never met a man like him. After a long time, Benjamin knelt. The wood was hard against his knees. He didn't know the right words anymore, didn't remember the prayers from childhood, so he just spoke. I killed the man responsible for Anna's death, he whispered. The pilot who missed the pre-flight checks, who was drunk, who should never have been cleared to fly. I found him and His voice broke. I made him suffer, made him beg. And when he died, I felt nothing, just empty. The chapel absorbed his confession without judgment. I thought revenge would fix it, thought if I made enough people pay, the pain would stop. But it didn't. It never did. Benjamin's hands clenched on the pew. Then Betty walked in. And she didn't fix me, she just showed me what I'd become, showed me what I could still be if I tried. He stayed there until his knees went numb and the coffee went cold. When he finally stood and returned to Betty's room, he found Olivia sitting up in the bed, staring at Betty's face. Mama, Betty, the child whispered, her first words in 3 days. Benjamin's heart stopped. Baby? Mama Betty, wake up. Olivia's voice trembled. Please, wake up. She laid her head on Betty's shoulder and began humming again. Not the freedom song this time, but the lullaby about sparrows, the one Betty sang when Olivia couldn't sleep. Benjamin sat beside the bed and took Betty's other hand. She's right, he said quietly. You have to wake up, Betty. She needs you. I need... He stopped, steadied himself. We need you. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. The hospital hummed with distant voices and footsteps. And for 3 hours, nothing changed. Then, just as the sun began to set, Betty's fingers twitched. Benjamin's grip tightened. Betty? Her eyelids fluttered, once, twice, then opened, unfocused at first, confused, searching. Mama Betty! Olivia sat up, tears streaming. You came back! You came back! Betty's gaze found the child's face. Her lips moved, barely audible. Baby girl. Olivia threw herself forward, wrapping small arms around Betty's neck. Betty's hand, weak but steady, came up to stroke the child's hair. I'm here, Betty whispered. I'm right here. She looked past Olivia and met Benjamin's eyes. He was crying, tears running freely down his face for the first time since Anna's funeral. His hand still held hers, and he couldn't make himself let go. You saved her, Benjamin said, his voice wrecked. You almost died, and you saved her. Betty's smile was faint but real. Just did what love does. What love does, he repeated, the words foreign in his mouth, then quieter. Thank you. She squeezed his hand, barely any pressure, but he felt it like an earthquake. You're welcome. Olivia settled against Betty's chest, her tears soaking into the hospital gown, her humming resuming. This time, a sound of joy rather than grief. Betty's hand moved slowly, gently, stroking the child's curls. And Benjamin sat there, still holding Betty's hand, watching the woman who'd walked into his fortress and taught his daughter how to cry, taught her that grief wasn't weakness, that love wasn't danger. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let yourself feel. A nurse appeared in the doorway, saw the three of them, Betty awake, Olivia clinging to her, Benjamin crying openly, and quietly backed away, pulling the door shut. Let them have this moment. Let them have this impossible, improbable miracle. In a house built on blood and fear, love had somehow taken root, and against every odd, every threat, every attempt to destroy it, love had survived. Betty closed her eyes again, exhaustion pulling her under. But her hand stayed in Benjamin's, and Olivia stayed curled against her heart, and for the first time in 2 years, Benjamin Gutierrez allowed himself to hope. Maybe Mrs. Alvarez was right. Maybe Betty had been sent not just to save his daughter. Maybe she'd been sent to save them all. The phone records arrived on Betty's 7th day of recovery. Benjamin sat in his study at 3 a.m., the evidence spread across his desk like accusation made manifest. Call logs, text messages, bank transfers, a trail so clear it might as well have been written in blood. Rico Morales, his right hand, his brother in everything but blood. The man who'd stood beside him through wars, negotiations, betrayals. The man who'd helped him build an empire. Had orchestrated the attack on his home. Benjamin's hands shook as he read the final message, sent 2 hours before the assault. Package located. Team deployed. Extraction in progress. The package was Olivia, his daughter. Rico had sent men to kidnap her, or worse. to destabilize Benjamin's control, to prove he'd grown weak. To seize power while Benjamin was distracted by a woman who sang hymns and wasn't afraid of monsters. The phone in his hand cracked under the pressure of his grip. "Sir?" Marco stood in the doorway, weapon ready. "He's here, secured in the basement as ordered." Benjamin stood slowly, his mind already cataloguing methods. He knew 17 ways to make a man beg for death. Knew which cuts hurt most. Knew how to make betrayal feel like eternal damnation. He'd used them all before. But as he descended the stairs toward the basement, he heard Betty's voice in his memory. Just did what love does. Love. What a foreign, impossible concept. What did love have to do with men who tried to murder children? What grace existed for those who betrayed trust? Rico was chained to a chair in the center of the room. Blood dripping from a split lip where Marco had encouraged cooperation. His eyes met Benjamin's, not with fear, but with defiance. "Boss," Rico said, his voice hoarse, "let me explain." "Explain?" Benjamin's voice was death itself. "Explain how you sent 3 men to my home, how you drugged my guards, how you tried to take my daughter." "I tried to save your daughter." Rico spat blood. "From her. From that woman who's got you so twisted you can't think straight anymore." Benjamin moved closer, each step measured. "Her name is Betty." "I don't care what her name is." "She's turned you soft." "The families are talking, boss. They smell weakness. They're circling." Rico leaned forward as far as his chains allowed. "I did this for you, for the organization. To prove that you're still the man who built this empire. By trying to kidnap Olivia. By removing the distraction. The plan was simple. Take the kid, blame it on the Calabrese family, use it to justify the expansion we've been planning for months. But that woman..." Rico's face twisted. "She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be downstairs. The guards said she never left the kid's side. How was I supposed to know she'd throw herself in front of a bullet?" Benjamin's vision went red. His hand was around Rico's throat before he could think, lifting him and the chair off the ground. "She nearly died protecting what you tried to destroy." Rico choked, gasping. "I was protecting your legacy." "My legacy?" Benjamin's laugh was bitter. He dropped Rico, the chair crashing back to the floor. "My legacy is a terrified daughter who calls a nanny mama because I was too broken to be her father. My legacy is blood and fear and a house where love goes to die." He crouched down, eye level with his former friend. "You didn't do this for me, Rico. You did it for yourself. Because you couldn't stand that a woman with no power, no weapons, no connections could do what all your violence couldn't. Make me remember what it is to be human." "She's made you weak." "No." Benjamin stood. "She's made me honest." He pulled his weapon, pressed it to Rico's forehead. The man who'd been his brother closed his eyes, accepting his fate. And Benjamin pulled the trigger. The click echoed in the empty chamber. Rico's eyes snapped open, confused. "You're done here," Benjamin said quietly. "Marco will drive you to the airport. You'll take the money I've transferred to your account, enough to start over somewhere far from my reach, anywhere in the Americas, and you're dead. Understand?" Rico stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're exiling me? I'm showing you grace you don't deserve." Benjamin turned to Marco. "Make sure he leaves the country. Then burn every record of his involvement. As far as the families know, he retired." "Boss, are you sure?" "Do it!" Benjamin left before Rico could respond, climbing the stairs back to the main house. His hands were steady now. His heart was quiet. He'd made a choice that would confuse his enemies and worry his allies. A choice that prioritized mercy over message. A choice Betty would have made. 3 days later, Betty was cleared to leave the hospital. She sat on the edge of the bed, dressed in borrowed clothes, her discharge papers signed. Mrs. Alvarez had brought her belongings from the mansion. Everything fit in a single canvas bag. "You don't have to go," the older woman said quietly. "Mr. Gutierrez has arranged for you to stay in the guest house. Full salary, full recovery time, whatever you need." "I know." Betty zipped the bag slowly, her side still aching. "But it's time. The child will be fine." Betty's voice was firm, even as her heart broke. "She has her father. She has you. She has a whole household of people who can care for her. But none of them are you." Betty stood, testing her balance. "That's exactly why I have to leave. She can't depend on me forever, Mrs. Alvarez. She needs to learn that love doesn't mean people never leave. It means you survive when they do." She'd thought it through during the long hospital nights. Olivia had called her Mama because she was filling a void, but Betty couldn't fill it forever. The child needed her real parent, needed to bond with Benjamin, to build a relationship that didn't require a buffer. And Betty needed to go home, to her brother, to her own life, to something that wasn't borrowed grace in a borrowed world. The car ride to the mansion was silent. When they arrived, Benjamin was waiting on the steps. "You're really leaving," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." Betty kept her voice steady. "I've arranged." "I know. Mrs. Alvarez told me. That's generous, but Olivia needs you. Olivia needs you." Betty met his gaze. "She needs her father to be present, to hold her when she cries, to sing to her, even if your voice isn't perfect, to show her that she didn't lose both parents." Benjamin's jaw clenched. "I don't know how to be what she needs." "Yes, you do. You're just scared." Betty's voice softened. "You think if you love her too much, you'll lose her like you lost Anna. But Benjamin, you're losing her right now by staying distant, by letting me be the bridge instead of building your own." "So this is for my own good?" His voice hardened. "You're abandoning us for our benefit?" "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm—" "Mama, Betty!" They both turned. Olivia ran from the house, Mrs. Alvarez chasing behind her. The child threw herself at Betty, wrapping small arms around her legs. "You came back! You came back!" Betty knelt carefully, wincing at the pull in her side. "Baby girl, I came to say goodbye." Olivia's face crumpled. "No. No goodbye. Stay." "I can't, sweetheart." "Why?" Tears streamed down the child's face. "Why are you leaving?" "Because—" Betty looked up at Benjamin, then back at Olivia. "Because you have everything you need right here. Your daddy loves you so much, and I need to go take care of my family. I'm your family!" Olivia's voice rose to a wail. "Don't go! Please don't go!" She clung tighter, her small body shaking with sobs. Betty held her, tears burning her own eyes. Over Olivia's head, she saw Benjamin's face, devastated, lost, angry. "This is cruelty," he said quietly, "not kindness. This is survival." Betty gently loosened Olivia's grip. "For all of us." "Don't go!" Olivia screamed, reaching for her as Benjamin lifted the child into his arms. "Mama, Betty, don't go. I love you, baby girl." Betty's voice broke. I love you so much. But your daddy's got you now. He's going to take such good care of you. She stood, grabbed her bag, and walked to the waiting car before she could change her mind. Behind her, Olivia's screams echoed across the driveway. Mama Betty! Come back! Come back! Betty climbed into the car, closed the door, and let the tears fall as the driver pulled away. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If she saw Olivia's face, saw Benjamin holding his daughter while she screamed for someone else, Betty would never leave. And she had to leave. For Elijah, for herself, for the girl who needed to learn that her father was enough. Benjamin stood on the mansion steps, Olivia wailing in his arms, watching the car disappear down the drive. She's gone, Olivia sobbed against his shoulder. She's gone, Daddy. I know, baby. Benjamin's voice was rough. I know. Why? Why'd she leave us? Because... He carried Olivia inside, her small body shaking with grief. Because sometimes people leave even when we need them, even when we love them. Just like Anna. Just like everyone he'd ever let himself care about. He carried Olivia to the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, the same chair where he'd watched Betty sing lullabies and make magic out of patience. Olivia curled against his chest, hiccuping through her tears. Want Mama Betty? She whispered. I know. Benjamin stroked her hair, the gesture foreign and awkward. But you've got me. Is that okay? Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. Sing? Benjamin's throat closed. Baby? I don't... Please? He closed his eyes, remembering Betty's voice, the freedom song that had changed everything. He didn't know all the words, didn't have her gift. But he opened his mouth and tried. Wade in the water. His voice cracked. Wade in the water, children. Olivia stilled, listening. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. It was terrible. Off-key, halting, nothing like Betty's smooth melody. But Olivia's breathing began to slow. Her grip on his shirt loosened slightly. Benjamin kept singing, kept rocking, kept holding his daughter while the house settled into silence around them. Through the window, he could see the empty driveway where Betty's car had been. She'd walked away, had chosen to leave rather than stay in a world that wasn't hers, had given him back his daughter and trusted him not to destroy what she'd built. Grace. She'd shown him grace again, and now he had to prove he deserved it. Sleep. Baby, he whispered, still rocking. Daddy's here. Daddy's got you. Olivia's eyes drifted closed, exhausted from crying. Benjamin held her long after she fell asleep, staring out at the empty drive, wondering if love always felt like this, like loss and hope and terror all woven together into something too complex to name. In the silence, he made a promise. To Olivia, to Betty, to himself. He would be the father his daughter needed, would learn to sing even when his voice broke, would choose grace over violence, love over control, presence over power. Because Betty Drake had walked into his fortress and shown him what it meant to be human, and he refused to forget the lesson just because the teacher was gone. 3 weeks without Betty felt like 3 years. The mansion returned to what it had been before. Silent, cold. A mausoleum dressed in marble and crystal. The staff moved through their routines with mechanical precision. The guards rotated their shifts. The house functioned exactly as it was designed to, but it didn't breathe. Olivia stopped speaking on day 4. She ate when Mrs. Alvarez coaxed her. She slept when exhaustion claimed her. But the light that had flickered to life during Betty's time, the curiosity, the laughter, the tentative joy, had extinguished the moment that car disappeared down the drive. Benjamin tried everything. He sang the freedom song, though his voice cracked and the words tangled on his tongue. He read her stories. He held her when she cried. But Olivia looked through him as if he were made of glass, searching for someone who wasn't there. "She's grieving," the child psychologist explained during her weekly visit. "This is the second mother figure she's lost. The trauma is compounding. With time and consistency." "How much time?" Benjamin's voice was sharp. "That depends on the child. Months, possibly. Maybe longer." Longer. Months of watching his daughter fade back into the shell she'd been before Betty arrived. Months of singing songs he didn't know the words to. Months of being not enough. At night, Benjamin sat in his study and reread the letter Betty had left with Mrs. Alvarez. "Dear Benjamin, thank you for giving me the opportunity to know Olivia. She's extraordinary, strong and tender, and so much braver than she knows. Keep singing to her, even when you think you're doing it wrong. She doesn't need perfection, she just needs you. I've arranged for Elijah's lawyer to contact you about the appeal funding." "I can't accept your generosity without earning it properly, so I'll work with a local family to pay you back." "It might take years, but I will. Tell Olivia I love her. Tell her that leaving doesn't mean abandoning. Tell her that some people stay in your heart even when they can't stay in your house. Take care of each other. Betty." He'd read it so many times the paper had begun to soften at the creases. Each word felt like an accusation. Keep singing. He was trying. God, he was trying. But he wasn't Betty. Couldn't be Betty. And his daughter knew the difference. Week 3, evening. Benjamin found Olivia standing at the front gate, her small hands wrapped around the iron bars. She wore her pajamas and was barefoot despite the autumn chill. In her arms, she clutched Betty's cleaning cloth, the one she'd held the day Betty sang to her for the first time. "Baby, what are you doing out here?" Benjamin approached slowly, afraid any sudden movement would shatter the fragile moment. Olivia didn't turn, just stared down the empty drive, her voice small and distant. "Waiting." "For who?" "Mama Betty. She coming back?" Benjamin's chest tightened. He knelt beside her, careful not to touch. "Sweetheart, Betty's not—" "She coming back," Olivia insisted, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "She promised. She said she loved me. People who love you come back." "But they don't," Benjamin wanted to say. "People leave, people die, people disappear, and all the love in the world can't bring them home." But he couldn't say that to a child who'd already lost too much. "Come inside," he said gently. "It's cold." "No, waiting." So Benjamin sat on the cold ground beside his daughter and waited with her. Waited for a woman who wasn't coming. Waited for a miracle that wouldn't happen. Waited because sometimes love meant sitting in the cold with someone who was hoping for the impossible. They stayed there until the sun set, and the security lights flickered on, and Olivia's small body began to shiver. Only then did Benjamin lift her. She didn't resist, just curled against his chest, still clutching that cloth. "She's not coming, baby," he whispered against her hair. "I'm sorry, she's not coming." Olivia said nothing, just closed her eyes and hummed, broken, off-key, heartbreakingly quiet.
The freedom song. Benjamin carried her inside, and the mansion swallowed them back into its cold embrace. That night, at 11:47 p.m., the doorbell rang.
Benjamin was in his study, staring at security footage of Olivia at the gate, when the chime echoed through the house. He pulled up the front camera feed and froze. Betty stood on the steps, a suitcase beside her, her hands clasped in front of her like someone at a funeral. She looked tired, thinner, like she'd been fighting a war and wasn't sure she'd won. Benjamin was running before he could think. He threw open the door, breathless. "Betty!" She looked up at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "I thought I could leave," she said quietly. "I was wrong. What happened?" "I went home, visited Elijah, told him about the appeal funding, about everything that happened." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He asked if I was happy, and I realized I haven't been able to breathe since I left. Every night I hear Olivia crying. Every morning I wake up reaching for her. I thought leaving was the right thing, giving you space to be her father, giving her space to bond with you. But all I did was abandon her when she needed me most." "Betty, you didn't—" "I did." Her voice cracked. "I told myself it was noble, that I was teaching her resilience. But the truth is I was scared. Scared of staying in a world I didn't belong to. Scared of loving you both so much it would destroy me when it ended." She took a shaky breath. "But it's destroying me anyway. Being away from her, from both of you, it's killing me slowly." Benjamin stepped onto the porch, closing the distance between them. "She's been at the gate every evening, waiting for you. She said people who love you come back." Betty's face crumpled. "I should never have left." "No." Benjamin's voice was rough. "You should never have felt like you had to leave. This is my fault. I should have asked you to stay differently. Not as staff, not as obligation, but as—" He stopped, the words tangling. "As what?" Betty whispered. "As family." The word came out raw, honest. "You saved my daughter's life. You saved mine too, in ways I'm still understanding. And I let you walk away because I was too proud, too scared, too broken to admit that I need you, that we both do." Betty's tears fell freely now. "Benjamin, I'm a housekeeper from Georgia. You're a man who's killed people, who's built an empire on blood, who didn't know how to love his own daughter until you showed me." He took her hands, held them between his. "Betty, I don't care about pedigree or propriety or what my organization thinks. I care that my daughter sleeps peacefully when you sing. I care that you faced armed men to protect her. I care that for the first time in 2 years, this house felt like a home instead of a tomb." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying stay. Not in the guest house. Not as staff. Stay as family. Whatever that means to you. Help me raise her. Help me be better than the man I was. Help me—" His voice broke. "Help me not lose you both." Betty searched his face, and he let her see everything. The grief, the hope, the desperate love he'd been too afraid to name. "She needs you," Betty said softly. "Not me. She needs both of us. And so do I." Benjamin squeezed her hands. "Please, Betty, come home." The word home broke something in her. She stepped forward, and Benjamin caught her, held her as she cried against his chest. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too." He pressed his lips to her hair. But I'm more scared of living in a house without you in it. They found Olivia asleep in the nursery, Betty's cloth still clutched in her hand. Betty sat on the edge of the crib, stroking the child's curls. "Baby girl," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left." Olivia's eyes opened slowly, confused, then focused, then went wide. "Mama Betty?" "I'm here, sweet girl, I'm right here." Olivia sat up and threw herself into Betty's arms with such force they almost toppled. "You came back! You came back!" "I did. And I'm not leaving again. I promise." "Promise, promise?" "Promise, promise." Betty held her tight, rocking gently. "I'm sorry I scared you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. You and your daddy, you're my family, and family doesn't leave." Benjamin stood in the doorway, watching them. Olivia looked up, saw him, and reached out one small hand. "Daddy, come." He moved forward, and somehow they found a way to fit. The three of them together, Olivia between Betty and Benjamin, held by both. The child settled between them, her breathing evening out, her face peaceful for the first time in weeks. "Not as staff," Benjamin said quietly over Olivia's head. "As family." Betty met his eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, the beginning of something neither of them could name, but both recognized. "Family's what you build," Betty said softly, "not what you're born into." Benjamin's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining around Olivia's sleeping form. "Then let's build it. Together." Betty nodded, tears on her cheeks, but smiling. Together. 6 months later, the mansion looked different in spring light. The windows were open, letting in sea air and the sound of gulls. Olivia's laughter echoed from the garden where she played with Mrs. Alvarez, chasing butterflies. Music drifted from the kitchen, Betty humming while she made lunch, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Benjamin stood in the doorway, watching his daughter run, listening to Betty sing, and feeling something he'd thought died with Anna. Peace. The fortress had become a home. The cold halls had warmed. The silence had filled with laughter and music, and the sound of love taking root in places violence had scorched. Betty appeared beside him, flower on her hands, a smile on her face. "She's happy." "She's not the only one." Benjamin slipped an arm around her waist, and she leaned into him naturally, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. "Mr. Gutierrez," she teased. "People will talk." "Let them." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I've spent my life caring what people think. I'm done with that." Olivia ran up the steps, breathless and glowing. "Mama, Betty, Daddy, come see! I found a ladybug!" They followed her into the garden, this strange, impossible family built from grief and grace. A Mafia boss learning to choose mercy. A woman from Georgia who'd survived violence to teach others how to heal. A child who'd learned that love doesn't always look the way you expect, but it's real nonetheless. As the sun set over the estate, painting everything in gold, the mansion glowed with warmth it had never known. No longer a fortress keeping the world out, but a home holding love in. And in the nursery window, forgotten but still present, hung the cloth Betty had used the day she first sang to a broken child, a reminder of where they'd started, a promise of where they'd go, together. In a house built on blood and silence, one woman's song became the sound of redemption. Betty Drake didn't just heal a child, she tamed a monster, softened an empire, and proved that even in the darkest stories, Love still gets the final word. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. Drop a comment below and tell us, did you think Betty would survive?